It's 5 o'clock, and welcome to everybody out there. I'm going to ask Jessica to take her slides down for just a second, if she doesn't mind, so that when I introduce her, you can see her. And I'm going to get started. This is week 1 of this year's run. This is the second year that we've done this virtually. And I'm Jen Simon, the Senior Policy Advisor for Equality State Policy Center and Director of the Gender Lens Project. And we're here tonight with the first week of these amazing training courses as part of ESPC's mission to make government more accessible to everyone in the Equality State. So I want to tell you a few things before we get started with Jessica. First, about ESPC. Equality State Policy Center is a nonpartisan, nonprofit coalition of social justice, conservation, and labor organizations dedicated to transparent government, fair elections, and thriving communities. Our team, Jen Lowe, the Executive Director, Anna Marquise, the Director of Outreach and Advocacy, is dedicated to civic engagement. And this is exactly the kind of program that we offer to make sure that more people in Wyoming can engage with our government more often. Again, ESPC is a nonpartisan nonprofit, which means that we do not support any political party or endorse or align with any candidates. What we do is ensure that everyone in Wyoming has the skills they need to engage with government. And as an advocate, a citizen lobbyist, a candidate, those are some of the ways that you can engage, which is why we offer the People's Review Live every month to talk about pressing issues. We also offer a SHAPE citizen lobbyist training once a year. And then obviously we offer Run. For the next step, for those of you who want to be engaged and part of public service, this is an opportunity for you to learn more about that. So this is really about leadership development and making sure that those of you who are thinking about running or are ready to run again have the personal, professional, and leadership skills that you need to succeed. So before I introduce Jessica, just a couple bits of housekeeping. This is a webinar. It is being recorded. As participants or attendees, you'll have access to the recording. Jessica is also generously going to make it possible for you to have access to her slides. So if there's anything that you didn't catch as she's moving through, you'll be able to look at those slides after the fact. Again, we're in webinar format. So hopefully, if I unmute myself, you'll be able to hear me. You'll be able to see Jessica. Soon you'll be able to see her slides and hear both of us. If you can't, please hit us up in the chat and we will get that sorted out for you. Everybody's muted, but if you have a question, we invite you to put it in the chat and we will do our best to get to questions. If we don't get to them tonight, we will absolutely put them in the follow-up email. And everybody, again, is invited to put questions in the chat as they come up. So onto the program. We're excited to have Jessica Jaubert with us tonight. She's a veteran of community campaigns in Wyoming through her work as the principal of 3 Elephant PR, where she serves as a project manager. She helps clients develop winning strategies. She incorporates messaging, design, stakeholder and community engagement. She works in tandem with local and state leaders. And she and her firm have won campaigns like CWC SPET in 2017, the lodging tax renewal in 2018, Yes for All SPED in 2019, along with multiple statewide initiatives. She's a 2019 Wyoming Business Report 40 Under 40 honoree, and Jessica is also a nominee for the Wyoming Women of Influence Awards. So welcome, Jessica. We're thrilled to have you, and we're really excited to get started with your presentation. So I'm handing it off to you.
Thanks so much, Jen, and I'm so grateful to everyone who is here tonight. Jen, can you just see my slide and only my slide? Great.
I can just see your slides and only your slides. I will mute myself for real now.
Fantastic. Like Jen said, my name is Jessica Jaubert, and I am so excited to be able to impart any wisdom that I might have from years of running issues-based campaigns and helping friends with their personal political campaigns. And hopefully these tools will help you, whether you want to run for office or help someone run for office. Some of the things we're going to be going over tonight, and like Jen said, if you have any questions as I'm going through things, please put them in the chat, and she has my full permission to interrupt me with any questions that you might have. So we'll make sure to cover those today. So one of the first things I want to address is one of probably the biggest barriers to office, which is like, who, me? Yes, you. We need different voices and experiences in all parts of government, whether it's town council, the hospital board, the Wyoming state legislature, even our federal government. Every one of these offices is important, and you bring valued experience to each office. You know, whether you're raising kids or dodging potholes, or you're living with a disability or experiencing water quality issues. Every person has witnessed and experienced a variety of issues. And it's so important that we have those diverse voices at the table who've experienced things and are bringing their own ideas and solutions to the table for discussion. So now that you've decided to run, or you're helping someone run, the biggest question you're going to get asked is, why are you running? Or, you know, what does your campaign stand for? So it doesn't matter what you're running for, you need to come up with things like the 3 reasons that you're running for office: affordable childcare, clean water, and affordable housing. Those are the 3 reasons that I'm running for office. Or a tagline or a slogan is a great way to get your message across. I have cultivated some amazing slogans that are vintage that I just love. And if you run with a chicken in every pot, you've already got my vote. So please feel free to use that slogan. If you're new to slogans, things that if you're a new person running for office, a great slogan can be like new vision, new direction. If you're an incumbent and you're trying to think of like, how can I make sure that voters know that I've done great work for them, things like trusted leadership can be a great slogan. These are just things that you want to have on rack cards, yard signs, bumper stickers. It's just very quick, concise, 2 to 3 word messaging that lets people know who you are. Another critical part of your campaign is what's called a message triangle. And it's so amazing, I've dedicated a whole slide to it. So a message triangle is a way for you to visualize how to communicate. So whether that's in a public setting, like a public forum, or going door to door, or at a meet and greet, a message triangle is a great way for you to visualize instead of having to remember 200 words every time you get up to talk. So the key things to a message triangle are the problem, visualization, and the solution. And to kind of illustrate how the message triangle works, I'm going to take you through something that I've just kind of created for this presentation tonight. So let's say I'm running for county commission. So how to use the message triangle. So I'm going to tell the audience that it's like, I'm running for county commission because I really care about affordable, available childcare in Teton County. So that's the problem. The visualization is great. It's a great time for you to do your own personal story, stories you've heard from neighbors and friends, or have facts that support why there's a problem in your community. So for the visualization, I would talk about how when I had my first child, even though we got on tons of lists right when we got pregnant, it took until Oscar was 7 months old for him to get into a daycare. And since those 12 years have passed, it's years now before people in Teton County sometimes can get into affordable, quality daycare facilities. And it's really important to have these things in a community because sometimes that means that dual income families have to become single income families. And also when you're thinking about in the long term for the children's kindergarten readiness, all these things are really essential. So now I'm going to get to the solution. So my ideas and solution for this problem would be a lot of homeowners associations in Teton County expressly prohibit home daycares from their neighborhood. As your county commissioner, I will work with HOAs and the county staff to come up with ways, ideas, and solutions that we can get home daycares in more neighborhoods throughout our county. This is an example of a message triangle. So you can use this for water quality issues, street construction, affordable housing, air quality, any types of problems that you're running for to address and you want to bring your own ideas and solutions to the table. So now we're going to tell people, we've come up with our slogan, chicken in every pot. We've come up with our messaging triangle, which is we need affordable quality childcare. And we're going to start telling people that we're running for office and we're going to make their lives better. Effective ways to tell people that you are launching a campaign is a press release. A press release really can just be like, I'm running for county commission. Here is my website. Here's my campaign manager. Here's where you can go for updates. It can really be simple. I think a lot of times people get like bogged down that a press release needs to be very formal. But there's so many examples online, and you can literally just take that example, put your information in, and get it to your local media outlets, newspaper, radio, things like that. So obviously you're going to announce your candidacy. You need a website, social media, and an email. And I strongly recommend that you have all three of those things together for one cohesive launch. It's really important that when you're introducing yourself, especially to new people, that you have your ducks in a row. And you wouldn't want someone to go to your website and click on an email icon and see an error that it's not set up. So it's really important that you have a variety of eyes on these things before you launch them, and they're all launched in a cohesive, structured manner. Another great way to meet with constituents and potential voters is meet and greets. Get some of your friends to host a barbecue or a cocktail hour or any type of informal way that you can meet people. Meet and greets are also a fabulous way to meet people that are going to form your campaign team. You never know who's out there that wants to stuff envelopes, go door to door, and get involved just in the political process. I find every year there's people that I never suspected that really just want to be engaged and make a difference in their community. And you can meet these people through meet and greets. And then snail mail. We're going to talk more about direct mail pieces later, but mail is still a great way to reach people. And like I mentioned earlier about that campaign team, we're now going to assemble our team. So we're going to get friends, neighbors, strangers, anybody who's going to be a great supporter or cheerleader for our campaign. One of the first people that I think that you should try to gather with is a mentor. A mentor can be someone who has run a political campaign before and has just like a ton of knowledge of what worked and what didn't work in your community, as well as people who run for office, both successfully and unsuccessfully. Just because someone might not have won one of their races doesn't mean that they didn't learn a ton from it. In fact, most of the time, those are the people that have the most information to give. A campaign manager, you know, a lot of times people are like, oh, a campaign manager. But a campaign manager is someone who just loves to be organized, loves Excel, loves making lists and checking them off. So be sure to, you know, look at your friends and see like who's the most organized person and ask them if they wouldn't mind helping you run a campaign. A treasurer, you know, a treasurer is something that it's nice to have, but it's also something that you and a campaign manager could also do successfully as well. But if you know somebody who is an accountant or just really good with numbers, you know, definitely ask them if they wouldn't mind helping you as you, you know, do this new journey. A social media genius. I mean, we're all on social media all the time, but some of us have friends that their social media just looks incredible. So maybe they wouldn't mind helping you bring that kind of pizzazz to your social media campaign. So feel free to reach out to friends and say, hey, is there any way that you can help me do split the post or come up with like, you know, your post always looks so polished and great. Would really like your second set of eyes on the things that we're creating. A graphic designer is a wonderful team member, but graphic designers can be pricey. My recommendation is, you know, have a graphic designer design your logo and colors and pick a font. Mail houses and yard sign printers and things like that, they typically have graphic designers in-house that can take your logo and your colors and make things for you. So I would recommend at the very least, have a graphic designer who does your logo and colors. It really makes a difference to start out with a really great design and color scheme. And then lastly, you need people who are willing to do anything. Envelope stuffers, door-to-door people. You know, these are your people who are just like, they're happy to help. They don't maybe want to take on the reins of a campaign manager or your social media genius, but they are willing to give you an hour of their time here and there. And those people are invaluable. Collect as many of them as you can find. And now that you've got your team together, it's time to start thinking about campaign materials. As I mentioned, a logo is crucial. And one of the things I want to highlight with logos that often people don't think about is, especially political signs, we typically see a lot of red, white, and blue. Have your graphic designer come up with some different color schemes that maybe incorporate blue and yellow or red and purple. You know, when we see these, just banks of yard signs as campaign season nears, you want your sign to stand out. So sometimes a different color that's not part of the red, white, and blue scheme can really be instrumental in helping you stand out in a crowd. Letters, snail mail. That kind of goes along with direct mail pieces. Any type of mail piece is going to be costly. But as you're raising money, definitely in your budget, set aside some dream money for reaching people door to door. It's a great way to communicate with people that aren't on social media. I know for some of us that might be unfathomable, but my grandparents have never been on social media, but they vote in every election. And it's very important to get in front of people like that and make sure that they know who you are and why you're running for office. Correspondence thank you cards. I always like to recommend that a candidate gets just some blank postcards printed. These are great for jotting down, when you're going door to door and things like that, and someone tells you that their section, they're really worried about speeding and children and pedestrian safety. I always like to write down like Sarah Miller, pedestrian speeding. And then when you go home and you have some time, just sending a really quick note to them to say, I really heard your concerns today, and if I'm elected, I'll really look into that issue. People love to be seen, and they love to know that when you're in office, you're going to work hard for the things that they care about. And lastly, a rack card door hanger. I would definitely recommend making sure that you have money in your budget for a rack card or a door hanger before direct mail pieces. I would also say I would go for the rack card. The door hanger that has the little cutout tends to be like 30% more than a rack card just for that little cutout. And I've done years of door-to-door campaigns, and rack cards shove nicely into a front door jamb and are just as readily seen as the hangers. So now that you've gotten your team and all your beautiful things designed, it's important that we continue to stay abreast of anything that's happening with the position that you're running for. So whether that's town council or the school board or a community college trustee, you want to make sure that you're familiar with anything from budgets, recent decisions, statistics, upcoming issues. And I think the best way to do that is to attend meetings. Make sure that throughout your campaign, you're trying your hardest to attend as many meetings as you can for the position that you're running for. I think this is the best way to see how government works and also to see what those upcoming issues are and how you might feel about them. Typically, when you're in a public forum, that's where most of the questions are going to come from, is what is in front of that particular board or body at the present moment. Win number. So this is a very interesting, thing, and it's why when Jen sent you my slides, the 4 things at the bottom, I'll bring you to like calculators and how to manage your win number and things like that. So please take a really good look at those things. A win number is, who do you need to talk to? Where do you need to find them? And it's about knowing your district and your county and your precinct. So your county clerk has all this information about how many registered voters there are and what percentage of turnout you got on election day. So the thing you'll need to do to calculate your win number is you need to collect the data for the last 3 elections. And this is really important. If you ran in a presidential year or if you're running in a non-presidential year, you want to make sure that you're collecting the data based off of those dates. So if you're running in 22, you don't want data from 2020 because more voters and different voters come out in presidential years versus non-presidential years. And if you're running for a special election, be sure to talk to your county clerk about where the best data is for a special election. So as you can see from the Excel sheet on the bottom right, what you want to do is you want to take your people that are registered to vote. So in this chart, it's 12,000. And then you want to take what percentage actually turned out for that particular election. To make it easy, this just says 65%. So then what you do is you get to the median, which is 12,000, and then the collected data that shows it's a 65% turnout, which would make votes cast at 7,800. So one win theory is that your win number is 50% plus 1, which is what this chart shows. It shows that you need 3,901 votes to win, which is the 50 plus 1. I recommend, and a lot of others out there are starting to recommend 52%. I think 50 plus 1 is kind of a very hard margin, and I think 52 is really where you need to be. So that would be my recommendation, that you calculate that at a 52% vote. So then what you want to do is you want to use this number to come up with a get out the vote and door-to-door strategy. So if you need 3,901 votes, you want to take information from the clerk's office, and that includes, you know, precinct data, demographics for neighborhoods and things like that. And what you want to do is you want to get together and come up with a plan. So for instance, you know, if you're in Sweetwater County and you're looking at the demographics and you see neighborhoods that consistently vote Republican in every election, 80 to 90%, you have those neighborhoods. If there's neighborhoods that are at 60% or 50% or any, you know, other type of percentage, you want to spend more time going door to door in these neighborhoods. It doesn't mean that you want to ignore that first neighborhood at 90%, but maybe you only visit it once because it's a secure neighborhood. Where these other neighborhoods, you want to spend much more time in cultivating voter turnout and getting people to understand why voting for you is important for them. And then also, you know, keep in mind that Wyoming, every county in Wyoming has experienced people moving in and moving out since the last election. So get with your county clerk and see what information they can share with you, how many new registered voters there are, what their registration is. You know, it's really important to come up with as much data as you can and see, you know, how things have changed and, you know, navigate your win number based off of that. Oh, my next button's not working. There it is. Okay, advertisement. So we need to get the word out because you're a leader and we'll be running things soon. Great advertisement is newspaper, radio, social media. You know, again, I mentioned how not everybody has social media, and it's really important to get in front of as many voters and as many types of voters as possible. So we want to make sure that we are budgeting for a variety of advertisement. So newspaper is so important, especially in the 2 to 3 weeks leading up to the primary and the general election. So many people get the newspapers to get the information on who they're going to vote for and why. Radio is a really effective way for voters to get to know you. Again, with the personal stories, hearing your voice and what you're passionate about really resonates with voters in a way that a lot of other media cannot. So be sure to contact your local radio station. Oftentimes they have packages for election years, and it's really helpful to plan out how much money you'll need for that. And then social media. Social media is great because it's a really effective way without spending too much money. You know, just be sure that you have all the information you need from your local advertising providers to come up with a well-rounded, multifaceted advertisement strategy. And then last but not least, don't forget that disclaimer. Every ad, no matter where it is, has to have paid for by. So be sure to do that. You don't want to go to jail. And like I mentioned, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you know what the heck TikTok is, I don't, but you know, my kids said it's really cool. These are all wonderful tools for you to get your message out, get your face out there, and lots of important things, you know, how to vote, how to register to vote, where to register to vote, how to absentee vote, things like that. One of the things I definitely encourage is coming up with a plan for posting. I typically recommend to post at least 3 times a week, and then 5 to 7 times a week, a month out from the primary and a month out from the general. It really needs to be ramped up before those 2 times. A great way to schedule social media so that you stay on top of it and you don't forget it. There's programs like Later, Hootsuite, Scad Social. All these programs allow you to, you know, schedule as far out as you want, but it just makes sure that like you're getting in front of people and you're not letting those things slip through the cracks. I will say that Later is the most cost effective, especially for a campaign where you're just managing one account on each platform. Typically, you can get Later for about $15 to $30 a month. So I really recommend that investment. And then what to post. As I said earlier, you know, how to vote, how to register. But also, it's such a great thing for people to see you in small videos. I know that Facebook is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks, and I really encourage you to sign up for that webinar, because navigating Facebook and Instagram, especially with political campaigns, is a whole nother thing in and of itself. And the information they give you is so critical to running an effective campaign. And then the last thing is develop a strategy with you and your campaign manager or your social media maven, whoever's helping you do that, with a strategy for responding to fans and critics alike. A lot of times people forget to respond to fans, but Facebook and Instagram's algorithm is set up that you go to the top for every time someone comments, you respond to their comment, you get what I'm going to call points. I doubt Facebook calls it that, but you get points every time there's that interaction. And it just makes your post get in front of more people organically, which means you're not paying for it. And also, people really like to see that you're engaging with commenters. So I'm a big fan of, even if it's just the thumbs up icon, a thank you, any of those things go a long way to showing people you're engaged. And unfortunately, sometimes we have critics. How dare they? So you need to come up with a strategy for how you're going to handle critics. Now, I have 2 schools of thought. It's totally different for someone to say, you know, it's like incumbents get a lot of critics because they have a voting record. It's totally different for someone to say, like, I don't like your vote on this water quality issue. And you respond and say, you know, thank you so much, Henry, for reaching out. And I'd love to, you know, talk with you more either on the phone or in person about why I took that vote and how we can work together. That's totally different than someone who is using disparaging language or foul language or anything like that. For those people, I typically will recommend that people hide the comments so they can't see that you hid their comment, only you know you hid their comment. If it's incredibly aggressive, you can delete it. And if someone is really just trolling your page in a very aggressive way, they can be banned from the page. But I really recommend not using that feature except for in really extreme circumstances. And again, just want to give a shout out that Facebook experts are coming and we'll have tons of information that you'll need to know. Oh, and before I forget, because this is really important, Facebook and Instagram don't allow you to do any paid advertising unless they have approved you. And if you live in Teton County or any part of Wyoming that doesn't have regular post office mail delivery, it's extremely important for you to get on that right now. I did a campaign a couple years ago and it took 3 months before we were approved. So it can be an arduous process, but you cannot run any political advertisement until Facebook approves your account. And I know the Facebook people are going to be here to tell you all about how to get that done in a couple of weeks. So again, really encourage you to attend that webinar so you can learn all about that. Fundraising. We need money. Show me the money. So one of the first things you should do is figure out who can give you money and how much. So the Federal Election Commission is a great resource for who can and cannot tribute, and the limits. There are different limits for the primary season and the general season. And that's important to remember. Your friends can donate in the primary, and then it starts all over in the general. So that's why I have ask, ask again, ask again. Asking is very important. I am always a big proponent that the person who is running for office should be doing the asking. And I think the best ways to do that is in person or on the phone. And then also, you know, a personal email can also work for fundraising. You should plan on spending about half of your campaign time raising money. I know that sounds daunting, but the more you ask, the easier it gets, I will say. Social media is a great way to raise money. You can do things like 40 under 40, asking people under 40 to give you $40, which brings me to a very important point, which is take all the payments. Please make sure that you're set up to take, whether it's PayPal or Square or whatever, you definitely want to take credit card payments to make sure that there's no barriers to your campaign, because in this digital age, very few people have cash on them or a checkbook sometimes. And then next Thursday, Kristin Walker, who is the Chief of Staff for U.S. Senator Lummis, is going to be here telling you all about fundraising. So again, really encourage you to attend that webinar because fundraising is a major part of your campaign and can really set you aside. When I'm talking about direct mail pieces and yard signs and things like that, it can be really crazy how quickly the money adds up. And then another critical part is door to door and get out the vote. So as I mentioned, RAC cards are a must. So make sure we're fundraising for those RAC cards. And then one of the great things that you can do.
Wait, I'm going to interrupt you really quickly because we had an earlier question that I didn't unmute to interrupt with because it was noisy here. But what are RAC cards? Will you just describe them really quickly because they are so pivotal?
Oh, I hate the fact that I don't have one. So a RAC card is a 4-inch wide by 9-inch high. I'm going to use a postcard, but it's not the right size. So like a RAC card is something like this. So it's a thicker piece of paper that's 4 inches wide by 9 inches long. And RAC cards typically are going to have your photo on them, why you're running for office. So like the bullet points of the things you're running for, like affordable childcare, affordable housing, water quality, those kind of things. They're also going to have on the back, they typically have when and how to vote. So it's like you can vote absentee, you can vote from 7 to 7 p.m. at these places for the primary. To save money, you can do the primary in general on one RAC card, and so you don't have to print 2 of them. And then you want contact information, how people can email you, your social media channels, your post office box, things like that. So it's double-sided. And then, like I was saying, when you go door to door, you can just shove it right in the door jamb if they're not home. But that's a great question. Thank you. And your local printers typically can print those types of things. So if you have a local printing store, they're a great resource for getting those printed. So we're going to take our RAC card and we're going to go door to door. And one of the great things you can do with people who volunteer to help you, but are not necessarily a part of your official team, like campaign manager or treasurer, is neighborhood captains. So a lot of people live in subdivisions that have, 100 homes or live in, a city kind of neighborhood area. And it's a great way to be like, Mark, if you could take this neighborhood, Ashley, if you can take that one, I just want you to be in charge of it for this election season. I will get you all the stuff you need. But if you really could just, do the door-to-door campaigning for those areas and put them in charge of it, it's a really great way to make sure that you're covering those neighborhoods, that your win number and all that demographic work showed you that you need to be hitting on a regular basis. Also, neighborhood captains are a great way. They know their neighbors. So it's a great way for people to see that people they know are supporting you and the reasons that they're supporting you. Meet and greets, depending on your comfort level with COVID and things like that, meet and greets are a great way, especially as we go into next summer when the weather is nicer, for people to get to know you. So like have a barbecue at a local city park, have a friend host, a wine and cheese event or something like that. It's a great intimate way to meet people, have them get to know you, and hopefully maybe get some of those neighborhood captains or people who are willing to do anything we talked about. Phone banking and text platforms, I really encourage people to know their community. A lot of people don't like to be called on the phone for political things or be bothered with text messages. And sometimes it can actually, cost you votes, but sometimes it can win you votes. I think that it's really about knowing your community and relying on that gut information. And then social media videos. Social media videos are a great way for you to get out in front of people. And as hopefully Facebook and Instagram will talk in a couple weeks, videos are rewarded in that algorithm system. And it can be just 5 seconds or 10 seconds where it's like, hey, I'm out here in Rafter J getting the vote out. Remember to vote next Tuesday from 7 to 7 and vote for me if you care about water quality issues and affordable childcare in your community. Done. But it's a great way to get in front of people. And then again, like you're going to pop up in more places just because those types of things are rewarded. And then after election day, a lot of campaigns maybe forget how important it is to be prepared for after election day. I'll go back to what Jen said earlier. You need those friends that win or lose are going to help you remove yard signs at 11 o'clock at night before the next day. And you also want to make sure that you have a plan together to thank all the people that have helped you, whether it's a person who gave you an hour to go door to door, all the way up to your campaign manager. Make sure you have a plan to make sure that these people are appreciated and seen. And then collect materials, all those yard signs. My whole rule of thumb is you want to make yard signs somewhat generic. And what I mean by that is like, I wouldn't recommend putting the year on them because you can reuse them. I have a friend who's reused her yard signs in 3 different elections, and it's fantastic because it's one less thing you have to raise money for when you run, and they're already done. So just think about that when you're talking about like yard signs and banners and things like that. Then, determine what you want to do with your Facebook page. If you won your election, consider turning it into a public office page. Facebook allows you to do that. If you did not win your election, consider just hiding it, and it will be there the next time you decide to run for office. And then, it's really important, and I can't stress this enough. I've been on both sides. I have lost issues. Jen only talked about my wins, but I did lose one issue, which was a District 2 referendum. It's just important to know that win or lose, you've put yourself out there and you've made a difference. You've given people ideas, you've given people things to think about, how they want to see their community, and you've really made a difference. And I just encourage people to keep at it and really make a difference, because your lived experiences, your ideas and solutions, they're all extremely valuable and they need to be heard and shared. And I just want to remind everyone again about the Run Wyoming candidate trainings. So campaign fundraising next Thursday, and then an incredible selection of women who hold elected office throughout our state on the 21st. And then on the 28th, a must for Facebook and Instagram social media training. And then that's all I have, but I would love to, hear any questions or anything that anyone has.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I feel like every time I get to listen to you talk about campaign work, I learn more and more. And even though you and I talked about some of these things earlier today, I feel like I have a whole list of additional questions. So maybe we'll minimize the presentation and I can jump into a couple of questions. And thank you again for doing this with us.
Of course.
Okay, so I want to start with one. What advice do you have, since we're in a non-election year? What advice do you have for people who are still actively considering, like, maybe I'll run, maybe I won't? What would you suggest? Where would they go? What should they be thinking about?
That's a great question, Jen. I think if you're even like marginally considering running for any office in 2022, the best things you can do right now are to start gathering that data for your win number, because that takes longer than you think. And county clerk's offices are busy. So to get all that information for 3 years is going to take some time. Also, I think like if you want a campaign manager, now is actually the time to start looking for that. I know people who are thinking of running in 22, and they have already started asking people to be their campaign manager. Those get snatched up pretty quickly. So definitely start thinking about that person, getting the data for your win number. I think those are the major things I would start thinking about sooner rather than later.
I love it. So now is the time. Like that's the top line message. Now
is the time.
This is really it.
Oh, and the Facebook approval. Get that.
Yes. So what I would say to anybody who's listening, who is thinking about running, do exactly what Jessica said. Like absolutely reach out to Facebook today, tomorrow, the next day, and start that process, and then come back and see us. Come to the next 3 trainings, but for sure come on October 28th, because then you'll have questions specifically for the Facebook team, and you'll be able to ask them and get answers about like, hey, I already submitted this information and I'm really struggling with this part of it. And that came up a lot last year for some of our candidates. So that's great advice to get started on that, like right this minute. You mentioned county clerk. Will the county clerk give you a list of all registered voters in your precinct or your district and contact information? How does that work?
So they won't give you a list until you have officially ran for office and you have either a political action committee or you have like a Jessica Jaubert for county commission. But what you can get is voter turnout information.
Okay.
And then you can also find out from them, if they've had 200 new people register to vote in the last year. And I believe you can ask them what affiliation. But the thing you need to collect right now is the things that are already available to you, which is voter turnout, registered voters, voter turnout, and figuring out that percentage in the last 3 elections. And then you should be able to, in your newspaper, actually should have a lot of information regarding like demographics and things like that. So one of the best resources is your local newspaper for a lot of information on the last 3 elections.
Okay. And I'm curious whether turnout in presidential years is similar or how it differs from turnout in non-presidential years. So like, will 2022's turnout look like 2020's turnout if you look at historical information?
If you look at historical information, presidential years are typically, there's a lot more voter turnout. Like I would say on average, Teton County is interesting because it's not as different. It's maybe about, I think it's 6%, but I've seen counties throughout the state where it's like 20%.
Okay, so big swing. So folks might not, so when you say last 3 elections, it might be off year elections if you're running in 2022?
Yeah, so if you're running in 2022, you want to look at 2018, 2014, and 2010.
Okay, that's helpful. And you made a good point. Lots of people have moved into the state. New folks have moved in during COVID. The other thing that I just want to say is that Wyoming is one of the states that purges its voter rolls after general elections, which means that if you didn't vote in the general election, now's the time actually to check your registration and go register to vote. But that also is one of the things that'll change how many people might be on the voter rolls when you go to your county clerk.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to realize that a win number is a great strategy in terms of like, what are the areas I want to target and how many votes in theory do I need to get? But I can't stress enough that really talking to people one-on-one and those touches, right? Like sending people that postcard that's like, I'm going to work hard on this issue. Those are all things that really matter to people, and they make a big difference.
They make a huge difference. So I appreciate you stressing that. So we know that we've got some folks interested in running, and I'm curious, where can they find filing deadlines, other official candidate information, so they know kind of what their timetable looks like?
So you mean like when do you have to like declare to run for office and things like that, Jen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you have paperwork you have to file, or financial information, where can you find all of that?
So the county clerk's office is another great resource, as is the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. So I would just encourage you to make sure that you are not missing out on any of those things. You still have tons of time before 2022, but again, I'm definitely someone that likes to plan, because if you miss the filing deadline, you literally can't run. So just make sure that you go ahead and look at the Secretary of State's office for those dates, or your county clerk will have those as well. And just go ahead and get those on your Google Calendar or your Outlook calendar, with like 5 exclamation marks behind them to make sure that you don't forget.
Awesome. Awesome. And before I get to my next question that's related to whether you can run as an independent, and how you might do that, Representative Sweeney just put a great point in the chat, which is 2022 might actually be a really big year because of the congressional race. It's also a gubernatorial year, but there's certainly a lot of attention focused on the U.S. House race.
Absolutely. And that's why I think we don't see as big of swings. That 20% was actually when I was looking at precinct information and things like that. It was from a while ago. You know, when we're not in a presidential election in Wyoming, all 5 of our statewide elected officials are up for election. So Wyoming still comes out pretty strong, no matter what year it is, because, you know, whether it's governor or president, like, we want to have our voice heard. And then what was the other question?
Well, so I was going to ask you, so to your point about missing the filing deadline, the filing deadline is for major party candidates. Is that correct? And then if you wanted to run as an independent, like Jim Roscoe, Representative Roscoe, who represents part of the northwest corner of the state, he's the lone independent in the legislature. What happens if you want to run as an independent?
So what happens is you're not in the primary, because the primary is for Republicans and Democrats. So you're not in those races, because depending on what race you're running for, like for instance, if you're running for the Wyoming state legislature, so you're running for your state Senate office, the only people that go to the general is 1 Republican and 1 Democrat. So if you're being primaried, meaning like you're a Republican and you have a Republican challenger, you kind of have to run 2 races, right? Like you have to run your primary race and then you have to run your general race. Where an independent, they have to just get so many signatures of registered voters, and they get to be on the ballot for the general election. So.
Great. And then can you talk a little bit about, that was really helpful. Can you talk a little bit about nonpartisan races? I think you mentioned some of the different things that people can run for. Will you highlight some of the ones that are nonpartisan?
Absolutely. Tell me if I get this wrong, because on the fly questions are hard. Your hospital board is not partisan. Your school board is not partisan, right? Town council is not partisan, or at least in Teton County, our Jackson Town Council is nonpartisan. So you'll have to make sure with your different districts and municipalities what the rules are. I don't know if that's Wyoming wide, but I know in Jackson it's nonpartisan. So how those races typically work is like school board and the hospital board, those, you don't even have a filing period till after the primary. So your filing period is typically in August. So you don't have a primary, so you save money. Yay! If your town council, how it works is, let's say 3 seats are up, so they will move forward 6 of the top vote getters. So each seat has 2 people running. So if there's 3 open seats, then 6 people move forward.
Okay. I think that's really helpful. And I know in last year's run, there were lots of folks who were running for some of those local nonpartisan offices. So we always want to stress those, because I think that when we have bigger conversations, it's usually about sort of people running for the Big Five or running for state legislature in particular.
And even in Jackson, the mayor is nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm,
so it's the top 2 vote getters move on to the general election. So, which can make races quite interesting because if you have 4 people running for mayor, you're kind of competing with all 4 of them. And then it's the top 2 vote getters.
Great. Will you give some thoughts to how people can use technology, since we're still sitting here talking via Zoom, which apparently some of us know how to use when some of us don't. But, how would you recommend folks continue to integrate technology like this into their campaigns as they go forward?
Yeah, I've seen people do some really interesting things with Zoom over the past 18 months, just because, we did have an election season during the pandemic. So I've seen people do anything from like a happy hour. I've seen them do games, like trivia and things like that. I think that there's ways to get people involved and not make it feel so Zoomy. And what I mean by that is like we're all on Zoom. But I think that bringing, innovative ideas to how you can make this fun and also get people engaged. So you really want to like ask people questions, and Zoom has all these amazing features where you can like do polls. You can do, breakout rooms, which maybe you don't want to do, but the polls I think are really interesting, So I think that there's ways to engage people on Zoom in that way. And then I would also recommend, if you're going to run in 22, do a lot of meet and greets outside.
I think that's exactly right. It's hard for me to think about that, since where I am and where you are in the state, it is currently raining and threatening to snow. So outside doesn't sound so great, but there's lots of good weather left in this season. And there's certainly in 2022 going to be ample opportunity for outside events. I want to hit on one more thing that I heard in your presentation. You said take all the payments. So that has continued to expand. So how would you recommend candidates integrate something like Venmo, which I feel like everybody who's not as old as I am, that's how they exchange money all the time. Credit cards make sense. All of that stuff makes sense to this old lady, but like, can you start to talk about some of those kind of technology?
Sure. Absolutely. What I'm going to say is Venmo is really easy. However, for campaign finance reports, you have to include people's names, their occupation sometimes, their address, all those things. The tricky thing about Venmo is that someone can just send you money, which we want it, but someone can send you money without all that information. So my suggestion is, if you're going to take Venmo, have somebody, whether it's you or your treasurer or your campaign manager, who's going to be responsible for getting that information.
That's helpful, I think, on a couple of levels, right? Like a helpful reminder that there has to be good record keeping, right? Yes. That there are certain things that we are responsible for tracking. And that's another great place to go get all that information on the Secretary of State's website, like you said. And your local county clerk is going to be a great source of information. But it's a good reminder of exactly what we need to be tracking and how to get it to align with the various technology.
Absolutely. And Kristin Walker, who's doing the webinar next Thursday, I mean, she just has so much knowledge and information when it comes to these things. But that's the one thing I will share, is that Venmo is easy. But you just want to make sure that you're collecting that information, because we don't want to get in trouble with the FEC.
Yeah, no, we definitely do not. No one wants to go to jail, as you said. I want to make one more plug for the volunteers, who are people who will do anything, because as Jessica pointed out, campaign signs are heavy and they come up and down in sort of the dead of night. So you definitely want those people on your campaign, especially if they're funny. I also think that tonight, maybe we heard from you, Jessica, that you're considering a run for office, because it feels like you've got a campaign platform. That's pretty great. But before we go, I would just love, do you have any parting shots, like any hot top line message that you want to make sure everybody takes away?
I think the message I want everyone to take away with is like, I think campaigns like seem daunting, like there's just so much to do, but it's like, it's seriously why I give my slides to the Equality State Policy Center and the Jen is like, I want people to have these tools because I think when you can get a breakdown and like a checklist of what you can do, like you can do anything, right? It's kind of like training for, you know, a hike or a marathon. Like if you put in the work step by step, you can get to the top, you can achieve your goals. So that's kind of what I would say is that like, don't feel like, oh my God, like a campaign is like daunting. Really just break it down. And like, if you're even thinking about running in 22, you know, you're so far ahead of the game. So I would just say like, get organized, start chipping away at some things. And, you know, and also realize that like your friends and neighbors and just people in the community that care about the issues you care about, they want to be involved. People want to see your ideas and solutions come to light.
I love that.
Give their time.
I love that. And you know, that's just such an important parting shot, right? Your voice deserves to be heard, and it'll make a difference in our communities. I want to thank you again. Yay, Representative Sweeney.
Yes.
We need more women in all of these positions. Please run. We cannot emphasize that enough. We need a Wyoming legislature, county commission, town councils, all of the levels of offices that better reflect our Wyoming communities. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the tools out to everybody who is interested in public service, who can bring their voice to the policymaking table. So I want to say thank you again to you, Jessica, to everybody who attended, to everybody who couldn't make it tonight, but signed up so that they could watch this over the weekend. I appreciate that. We're pretty excited about you. And I just want to say again, thank you. Please join us next week. Please join us all Thursdays at 5 p.m. in October. And a special thank you to our donors too. Equality State Policy Center is, as I said, a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we really exist thanks to our generous donors. So again, we hope to see you next week. We'll be talking fundraising with Kristin Walker, the Chief of Staff for Senator Lummis, Wyoming's first ever woman elected to the U.S. Senate. She's a former colleague of Jessica's, and she'll be talking about fundraising for your campaign. So we will follow up with you and make sure that you have the link for that. And I want to say thanks to everybody again, and we'll see you next week.